Welcome to how to reduce the amount of sugar you consume without depriving yourself or having to use willpower. I came up with the idea for the class after I saw a Facebook friend posting about how she was going through sugar withdrawal. I don't know exactly what program she was doing, but she was doing a program where basically she cut out all sugars in her body, and she was going through a withdrawal, which is typical. And she had said something like, "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" And I thought, well, it's because the program's not focusing on the gut microbes too. And also, a lot of people who attempt to quit a bad habit, right? Whether it's smoking, whether it's drinking too much alcohol, whether it's eating too much sugar or drinking too much soda, diet soda, something like that. The thought process is we have to quit it. We have to stop it, right? It's like a lot of the typical processes are you wake up Monday morning and your life is different. You just stop, right? And that's depending on deprivation, it's depending on your willpower. And most people are not successful when they try to quit bad habits like that. So another thought was when I had this friend who posted on Facebook, another one of my thoughts was, well, it's the microbiome. Plus, it's a lot easier to be successful if you don't focus on quitting the sugar, but you focus on adding other healthy foods into your life to replace the sugar. That way, it's no deprivation. It's a slow decrease. And again, you're not saying, I'm never going to have sugar. I can't have sugar. You're just eating foods that don't have sugar a lot. You're making conscious choices. And then sometimes you can have the sugar and you're going to be absolutely fine with it. Okay, so I have my notes over here. I actually wrote 5 pages of notes, but I don't want that to scare you. I don't think the class is going to take like a ridiculously long time, although I didn't really time it, I'll be honest with you, but I'm expecting it to take about an hour. If you have any questions, please just type them in as they arise. I have a certain spots in the outline designated for me to look to see if there's any questions. So while I might not see it right away, I will stop at certain points to ask or to look for questions or comments and talk about them. So thought I'd start off with talking about why there's so much sugar in our food products. So some of you had done the pre-work and had come to the realization that there were many products in your pantry, in your refrigerator, and in your freezer that had different type of sugar ingredients in them, because I gave you a list of all the sugar ingredients, and or it could also be artificial sweeteners. So why is this happening? Why is our food supply, or I should say prepackaged foods, why are they so full of sugar? Well, in the mid 70s is when the fat-free craze started. So there was dietary guidelines, government dietary guidelines were created after a hearing that was called by Senator McGovern from South Dakota. So he called in experts at this hearing to testify, one being a Harvard professor and some other health gurus, to testify about that fat was causing heart attacks, right? Premature heart attacks. So the government made these dietary guidelines that told people to eat what carbohydrates means are vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. So what happened was the food manufacturers took this information, right? And they started this fat-free marketing craze. So if you recall in the 80s, I don't have memories about the 70s, so it could have been starting in the 70s. I remember my mother drinking Tab with the artificial sweetener, the saccharin in it, right? I do remember that being marketed to her as a healthy soda alternative. But definitely in the 80s and 90s, fat-free was like the thing. So I remember in college in the mid 90s, I was brought up on fat free, right? Everything's supposed to be fat free. Fat is bad for you. Fat makes us fat. So there are these cookies called Snackwell cookies, right? And they were fat free. And I remember in my dorm um, room, so many of my friends, they would eat an entire box of Snackwells, right? It was okay. It was fat free, right? You're not going to get fat. It's not making you fat. Yet when we were in college, myself as well as most of the other young women that I went to college with, we really struggled with weight. Not that we struggled, but we got bigger and we could not get to the size that we had been as teenagers. Most of us, a lot of us that I went to college with, went through that. So what happened was, okay, so I wanted to talk about something else before we get into the, yeah, okay, never mind, I missed it. I was going to tell you about the diet heart hypothesis, which I guess I will. I'll just take a little tiny bit, just a few minutes, of why this senator was convinced that fat was causing premature heart attacks. It's based on the diet heart hypothesis, which was created by Dr. Ansel Keys in the late 1950s. He did a study called the 32 country study, and he studied the consumption of animal fats and cholesterol with the rate of, I believe it was heart disease, or it might have been death from heart disease. And he had 32 countries in the study, and he had a graph, and the plots for the 32 countries were kind of like all over the graph. And then what he did was he noticed that the country US had the highest rate of heart disease and deaths from heart disease, and they also ate the highest amount of saturated animal fat and cholesterol from animal products. And Japan, over in the other corner, had the lowest incident of heart disease and ate the fewest amount of animal fats and cholesterol from animal products. And in between the US and Japan, there were 5 other countries, and he could make like a nice little curve using these 7 countries out of his 32 country study. So he just omitted the rest of the data. He omitted all of the data for the 25 countries, and this was what the basis of that saturated fat and cholesterol from animal products causes heart disease. So if anybody, I shouldn't say if anybody, if you know about science and you studied science, if you did a small little project for your science teacher and you had data for 32 points and you just omitted 25 of those points because they didn't fit into what you were trying to prove, your teacher would not accept that, right? That's not good science. You just can't omit data. So that's what the whole saturated fat and cholesterol from animal products causes heart disease. That's where that's all from. That's where it started. So with that being said, you're always going to, whatever I'm going to teach you today, you're always going to be able to find scientific research that disproves what I'm saying as well as proves what I'm saying. I remember a commercial, it must have been at least 5 or 6 years ago because I haven't had any cable television since then. But it was a commercial on TV and it said, oh, science, research has shown that high fructose corn syrup acts exactly the same as regular sugar in the body. And, this commercial was about how high fructose corn syrup is safe and it's fine. But when you look at the commercial down in the, I don't know if it was the right or left-hand corner, who funded the commercial? Who funded the study? The corn growers of America, right? So of course, if they're paying scientists to come up with a data point, if you're a scientist and you're getting paid to do that, by a company, or that's an association, not a company, there's a very good chance that you're going to come up with whatever data that company wants you to come up with. So I just wanted to say that just because, so again, I can show you evidence that proves my point. You can also come up with evidence that disproves my point. And the reason why I say this is because I had a coaching call with a client just the other day, and everything I said, she was like, well, I read an article and blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. And I tried to have conversations about the scientific words that she was using, and she couldn't have them. And so just to say, yes, you can always find information that is opposite of what I'm saying, but I can also always provide you with sources that will back up what I'm saying. Okay. So back to the fat-free craze. So food manufacturers, again, the government dietary recommendation was to decrease fats, but they also recommended to increase vegetables, whole fruits, and whole grains. What the food industry did was they took the fat-free craze and they made a lot of their prepackaged products fat-free. Hi, Brandy. Hi, Andre. They made a lot of their products fat-free. So what fat does in foods, take, for example, milk as an example. If you have whole milk, right, it has all of the fat that's supposed to be in it. Even take a better example if you have farm fresh whole milk, right, where the cream and the milk is separated and you have to shake it up. When you taste that product, what does the fat do? It gives you a lot of creaminess, right? It gives you a lot of flavor. It gives a lot of really good texture. It actually makes you full too, right? So if you have skim milk, if you drink the amount of skim milk and the same amount of fat, full fat milk, you would be fuller for longer after the full fat milk because it has protein and fat in it, and both protein and fat keep us full the longest. So fat in foods give flavor, right? It gives texture, and it fills you up. What the food manufacturers did was to fit this fat-free craze was they took the fat out, but then the food products wouldn't have a whole lot of flavor. Say, for example, right, I just talked about milk, right? Fat-free, half and half. So you have half and half, which is supposed to be half cream, half milk, and you take the fat out of it. Now it doesn't really have a lot of flavor. So what food manufacturers did was they put sugar in food items to give it a lot of flavor. But then you also have to have things like emulsifiers, right? So you have even more processed ingredients because you put sugar in there, but fat also kind of holds everything together, right? If you think of like an egg when you're baking, that would be an example of an emulsifier. It's holding everything together. So they put the sugar in it, then they need other processed ingredients to emulsify. And then they also need other processed ingredients sometimes to give it texture. And sometimes there were some ingredients developed like maltodextrin, right? That's like a white powder that's derived from corn. And what it is kind of like a starch. It's a thickener, but it also has about 20% sugar in it. So sometimes when you're getting the thickener, then you're also getting additional sugar in there with it. So companies, everybody was kind of bought on the fat-free craze, and the less fat, the more sugar that there was in it. So that's how we have in the supermarket, because I went in the supermarket the other day and I took pictures of aisles that were just covered with sugar-laden foods. And it was almost every single aisle in the inside of the supermarket. So the best way to shop the supermarket, which is getting off topic, just one quick second, but is on the perimeter. Supermarkets are all kind of set up the same, right? You have dairy, you have meats in the back, you have your fish on the perimeter, and then you always have vegetables and fruits on the perimeter. They may be on different perimeters, but for the most part, with all supermarkets, all of the foods that you should be getting and purchasing first are found in the perimeter. Most of the foods in the aisle that are problematic to our health. Reason is a lot of them contain sugar.